Hey everyone, my name is Jessica, and in this video I'm going to be discussing whether or not I actually stuck to my budget in March and why you should look at your spending as well. So now that we're finally in April, I decided to go back on my March to see how well I stuck to my budget and whether or not I need to reassess how my budget is going. So I've noticed that often I'm really not aware of what I'm spending. I always just think, oh, I've got enough money. I've got money in my checking account, it's fine, I can spend it. But instead of paying off my debt, I'm paying money on stupid extra things that I don't even need. So going through my budget makes me so much more aware of what I'm spending and can also help me decide whether or not I need to reevaluate my budget. The only thing about March is that February and March were kind of weird months for me. So at the end of February, I moved, and in March I had some extra income come in, that just being like taxes and bonuses, and March was an extra paycheck month for me, so I had some extra income come in. But then I also had some additional expenses from the month before, so I was just trying to pay off some of that additional debt. And then there were some things that I normally wouldn't spend money on, but I needed to because of the move. So I tried to make my budget as normal as possible when I was going through to see how well I stuck to it. But there might have been some additional expenses that wouldn't normally be normal, so I did go over some categories that I normally don't. But anyhow, I tried to put most of those in an extras category just because it was weird and I knew that they were normal expenses. But some of the weird expenses I had might have slipped into other parts of my budget as well. So what I did was simple, and you guys can easily replicate this, but all I did was that I created a Excel spreadsheet, and I just went through and I wrote down all the individual categories I have of my budget. Now, if you don't currently have a budget, then I would just do more general kind of categories for you, like rent, bills, groceries, just really overgeneralized categories, and that might help you create your budget later on. But for me, I already have a budget created, so I just took every individual category that I already have and wrote those down at the top. And then below that, I wrote what my budget spending is for that specific category, so that later on I could compare the total that I spent and what I actually have budgeted for that amount. I then just went through every account that I make payments out of. So I started with my checking because that's the most common that I use, but then I also checked my 2 credit cards as well, just to see if I put any additional expenses on those credit cards. And then as I went through, I just put them into each separate category, and then at the end I totaled them all up, which is all super simple. Now, I would put aside like half an hour to an hour to do this. Of course, it depends on how much you have to spend, but it is going to take a little bit of time to set up and go through all of your checking accounts and all of that good stuff and writing them all in. But it's totally worth it to see what you actually spent in the end. So once I had that all arranged, I was able to evaluate how I actually did in March. And I have to say I'm actually pretty proud of myself because March was a crazy month, and I also always go way over budget on food, like way over budget. I have a really bad habit of just giving into whatever cravings I have, and so like while I'm sitting at work all day, once it's about 2 o'clock, I'm like, I really want some bean dip, and I really want some In-N-Out, and then I just go and get whatever I want after work. So I'm always super over budget on food, which this time I was still over budget on food, but I wasn't as over budget as I have been in the past. So this time I was only about $75 over budget on my food budget, which I still need to cut down because my food budget is already quite big because I know that I spend a lot of money on food. So that's just something I need to evaluate and think about and stay conscious about, so that this month in April, I'm not spending quite as much money on food. Another category that I went over on was my utilities. And this is something to be aware of if you move. So when I recreated my budget, I just kept the same amount for utilities that I had at my old place. At my old place, I was living in a small 1-bedroom apartment. And in this place, I moved in with my boyfriend, and we have a 3-bedroom townhouse. So it's quite a bit bigger. It's also older, and so the insulation isn't as great, and the heating is different, all of that good stuff. It's not as energy efficient. And March was a cold month, so we used a lot of money on heat. One of the things that's hard about utilities is that it's gonna change every single month, and you need to be aware of that. But I would rather be on the top end of that amount and have money left over than be scrambling to find out how I'm gonna come up with an extra 30, 40, 50 bucks to cover that weird amount. For now, since I'm still not sure exactly how much we'll be spending every month on electricity and utilities, especially since now the weather's changing and woo, it's finally spring. I don't know how much this month will be, but I did increase that budget so that I can account for that. Another category that I went over on was my miscellaneous category. And like I said, this month was a weird month. So I went way over budget on miscellaneous, but I did have a lot of extra income that covered that. Those miscellaneous expenses didn't go on my credit cards or anything, and I still spent quite a bit of that extra money to put towards those credit cards. I don't necessarily feel bad about going over miscellaneous, and I'm not going to change that category at all because March was just a weird month. So at the end of April, when I do this again, I will reevaluate that category, and if I'm still way over it, then I will reevaluate and see what I need to do. And one thing that was surprising was that I was under budget on what I have for gas. So last month I only spent like $45 on gas, and I have budgeted $90 for that. I live closer to work now that I've moved, so I'm not spending quite as much money. I actually reduced what I have for that budget. I reduced it to $60, and I took that extra 30 bucks and I put that towards my utilities instead. So now I have an extra $30 for my utilities, and hopefully that'll cover any crazy expenses that I have for utilities at this new place. So like I said, this is a super easy way to just become aware of your spending, aware of where you might be going over budget, and kind of help you think about, why am I going over budget on this? And is it something that I need to budget more for because it's not going to change really? That's going to be kind of a higher amount. Or is it something that I need to cut back on, like food for me? So I would definitely recommend, if you are struggling with your budget every month and you really aren't aware of your spending, to just do this quick and easy. And if you guys do decide to go ahead and do this little activity, please leave me a comment or message me on Instagram, because I'd love to know what you found out on your budget as well. And hopefully I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.